Ben was a normal baby. He was my third. I feel like I did everything right with him. I breastfed him. I made his own meals. Everything was organic, farm fresh. He was going to be my healthiest child.
My wife and I, we started our lives together, and we started having children, and our first two children perfectly healthy, no problems. We did all the things that young parents do, as far as we did the full vaccinations, got them ready for kindergarten. We fed them macaroni and cheese and hot dogs and chicken fingers, pizza as much as they could get it. Never had any health issues, really, to speak of.
It started when me and my brother started praying for a younger brother. I wanted a younger sister. Sam wanted a younger brother. And at night we would pray for another sibling, and Ben came. I was 7. Sam was around 5 at that time, so there's a 7 years difference between me and Ben. 2 years difference between me and Sam.
I really wanted a younger brother, and I prayed to God, and my mother got pregnant, and Ben was born.
We have this third amazing, beautiful child come along. 10.5 pounds he was when he was born. Big baby. And life was good. I mean, we were living the American dream. We had our vehicles, we had our jobs, we had our house, we had our kids, and everything was rainbows and lollipops.
And when he was about 15 months old, he started doing some neurological. I noticed some neurological things going on with him, and so we got him into a neurologist, and he had an EEG, and it showed he was having seizures.
As we went down the road with the seizures, we were told, hey, this is just developmental. We don't know why he's having them, but they'll go away. We had identified the seizures and got him on seizure medicine by the time he was 16 months old. And they said, we'll see you back in January. That's what we were told. And my wife and I said, no, we want to look further. We just want to look a little more. We want to do an MRI. And actually, at the time, we didn't have insurance. And so we said, we'll just pay out of pocket for it. We just want peace of mind. That's what we were looking for. So let's do an MRI.
And the MRI showed he had a 2-inch by 2-inch mass in his left temporal lobe, which is over here. And within 30 days, he had surgery to remove, I would say, about 60% of the tumor. They were convinced it was a pielocystic astrocytoma, but when the biopsy results came back in, they said it was not cancer and that it was cortical dysplasia. And that left us reeling, like, did he really need surgery? And, our doctors were like, yes, he probably would have needed surgery because of the seizures. We asked to get a second opinion, and the doctors, our whole tumor board team recommended, we don't really need a second opinion. You can trust these biopsies. He doesn't have cancer. You should be celebrating. Let's just keep up with the seizures. And so that's what we did.
They said that it wasn't cancer. It was cortical dysplasia, which is a deformity of the brain, basically. They said that it had to come out anyway, that it was going to keep making seizures happen, and they were going to get worse, and the surgery needed to happen one way or the other, but there was no cancer. So, of course, at that time, we're screaming from the mountaintops, hallelujah, praise the Lord. God took the cancer out of our son's brain. We've seen a miracle. This is amazing. And that's the life that we just continued to follow for a while.
So he was about 17 months old. He had the brain surgery. It stopped the seizures. He did not have cancer. And we went on with our lives until he was about 5.5.
We followed up with the MRIs like they told us to. At the 1 year mark, he had great scans again. They said, yep, everything looks great. And at this point, it's about 2018, and our family got up and moved across the country out to North Carolina from the Midwest. You know, when you're told your kid's got cancer and you battle it and you win, like we felt like we had, doing things like picking up and moving across the country doesn't seem that scary anymore, you know? So we got to North Carolina, and in 2020, at the start of 2020, you might remember there was something that happened. It was called COVID. And at the start of the year, Ben was still perfectly healthy. He had not had another seizure since the first surgery, but we wanted to just have him checked on. We needed to get a scan done, just make sure everything's okay. And so we started that process, and we're calling around trying to get him scheduled for an EEG. That was going to be the first step, and then a MRI after that. Because of what was going on with COVID, they wouldn't bring us in to do a scan. You couldn't get into the hospitals unless it was COVID related. So we kept getting put off, and in hindsight now, I feel like about that tall, because I should have been pushing. I should have been saying, no, we need to get him scanned. But we were told that there was no cancer, so there wasn't any sense of urgency there, and he had no signs of anything being wrong.
Ben was so athletic. He still is so athletic. The Ben I'm talking about before the second brain surgery and the Ben today are two totally different. Not totally different, but they're different people in a way. But I do want to touch on how Ben was during that 3.5 years of him not having cancer, but there was cancer. But he is athletic, loved rock climbing, loved climbing everything. We had really high hopes of when he became of age to just be into baseball and soccer. And we saw him going far with football and baseball because he was so athletic. He caught on everything so quickly, and he loved sports. So one day, as I'm waking him up to go to preschool, I'm noticing he's not using his right side. Like, he's walking, but it's weird. He's just walking funny. And, you know, he's using the restroom, but he's only using one arm to pull down his pants and one arm to pull up his pants. And I was like, Ben, why? You have two hands, God. I remember this so clearly, saying to him, Ben, God gave you two hands. Use them. And then he did. You know, I was like, that's so weird. I said, buddy, what's wrong? Because he was locking his leg. His knee was locking. It was hyperextending. But he wasn't hurt. He wasn't complaining of pain. It was just odd. And so he said he fell playing with our neighbor's dog. I was like, okay, that's feasible because you're very active and you're crazy and you run around. And so I took him to preschool, and I let his teacher know that his knee was hyperextending. She's like, okay, I'll watch out for it. I picked him up. She said he had a great day. Nothing was wrong. The next day, he was still hyperextending his knee and really not using, his arm was less noticeable, but his knee was really bothering me. So I took him to urgent care, and he was crawling all over the furniture. I mean, he was running down the hall. It was just so bizarre. And I took him to urgent care, and they did all the exams and everything. And they did an x-ray of his leg, and there was nothing wrong. And I was like, why is he not in pain? And they're like, we don't know. I mean, not once did anybody ever say anything to me about, hey, you know, he really isn't in pain. His gait's off. You should take him to the ER. Nothing. Well, you know, some kids handle pain differently, which I knew that with Ben. Ben's threshold to pain is really, really high. So I was like, buddy, are you hurting? He's like, no. So we went home the next day, woke up the next day. I'm taking him to preschool. And I had wrapped his knee because he told me to wrap it. And he said, Mommy, I have sand in my shoes. I was like, what do you mean you have sand in your shoes? So we get to preschool. I get him out. I'm like, maybe I've wrapped his knee too tight and he's losing circulation in his feet. So it's just like nothing was just making sense to me. I pick him up from preschool. This is a Wednesday. And his teacher says, Stephanie, I think there's something wrong with Ben. His face is drooping on one side. And then it was just like a light bulb just went off for me. Okay. I was like, what side? It's on the right side. And where the knee is, the leg, the arm. I was like, oh my God, he's having a stroke. Or he had a stroke or something. He wasn't showing any signs of having any seizures or anything. So we rush him to the emergency room and they do all the neurological tests. And they're like, it sounds like he may have had a stroke. Let's get him in for a CT. And so we get him into a CT and they come back and we're like, okay, we found something. We don't know what it is. It may look like a cyst. We don't know. So let's get him in for an MRI. And so it's about 3:00 in the morning at this time. We're not in a room. We're still in the ER. And he's finally went to sleep in my arms and they have to take him from me to give him an MRI. And he's 5. And the last time he had an MRI was when he was 1.5 and it was sedated. And he doesn't remember. He doesn't remember any of that. So he's crying and they can't sedate him because it's in the middle of the night. And so I just remember him crying in the MRI, asking me if he was going to die and what's wrong with him and why are they doing this to him. And I just had to be strong. I was touching his legs. I was like, buddy, you're not going to die. I promise you. I don't know what's going on, but we need to look inside your brain to see what's going on with your right side. And God, I just remember him crying and asking me, Mom, am I going to die? They bring him out and I get woken up by a team of doctors about 6 a.m. We found a tumor in his brain. It's pushing on his brainstem. And I said, what location? Where is it at? Because he had surgery when he was 1.5 in his, his left temporal lobe. And they said, it's his left temporal lobe. I said, interesting. We were told that he did not have cancer there. And apparently, come to find out, because this team, my current team of doctors, requested the tumor, the tissue tumor from the first surgery. They requested it to be biopsied and sent to St. Jude. And he was misdiagnosed. And they found pielocystic cancer cells in the tumor in the tissue from his first surgery. So he'd had this thing growing for years. And we didn't know because we were not told correctly. And something could have been done about it sooner. I liked the team of doctors I had. They were like, the minute we walked into the hospital, they were on top of it with him, with his care and everything. And they built, in such a short time, they built such a trust with me that I trusted them with Ben, even though I did not know them. And they recommended surgery. And I said, okay, are there anything else we can do? I don't really want to cut on him again. He had a lot of behavioral issues after the first surgery where he was very violent with our whole family. And I really don't want to go through that again. That was my main concern, was the behavioral. And we got through everything with that. And we were on the other side of that finally. And within a year, we were on the other side, and now we're right back where we were because a mistake that doctors and ourselves as parents made, trusting. And they said chemotherapy and surgery, but because the tumor is causing these physical issues, we recommend surgery. And I said, and at this point, it's hard because typically when parents get that cancer diagnosis, right, they're hit. But we not only got that cancer diagnosis, but we got the realization that they were wrong the first time. And we just realized that for years, that tumor had been growing in my son's brain and was being monitored because we were told incorrectly and we trusted that. And so now we have guilt for not seeking out like a second biopsy. So we were like, it was such a disbelief that I had a hard time thinking about anything other than just almost, I was just so rage and hurt. I just felt so much rage and hurt for what had happened, but they recommended chemo and surgery and chemo afterwards. And I remember my husband, Jesse, he said, "What about cannabis?" It was a very direct question because Ben was on CBD and we believe CBD really helped with his behavioral issues. And they said, no, there's no studies on cannabis with cancer. There's really nothing out there supporting anything with cannabis regarding cancer. And when you're mentally exhausted in the hospital and you have a team of doctors standing over you and you have your kid that's next to you and you're in the bed and they're broken and they're scared and you have to grasp onto just any hand that is coming at you to help you. And that's what we did. And they said, we believe we can remove enough of the brain tumor to bring that right side back. And please trust us. We got your son. And they were very confident that they could help us. In the surgery, the first surgery went well, other than the behavioral issues. But he came out of it walking, talking, swallowing, like you couldn't tell anything was wrong except the behavioral. So in my brain, I was like, okay, we're just going to make it through the surgery. There's no other options. We really don't want to do chemo. They weren't even laying that on the table. They said surgery was the one thing that they were recommending at that time. So that's what we did. About 5 days later, he had brain surgery for a second time.
Now, none of the doctors ever said that we got a misdiagnosis in the beginning, but they also did tell us that there's no way it was unrelated to the first mass that was removed. So ultimately, the first go around, it was cancer, and that's just not what they came back with on the pathology report. So they found it on a Wednesday, and this time it went really quick. The first time they found the tumor when he was a baby, it took 30 days before he had the surgery. This time they found the tumor, and 5 days later they had him in doing another surgery. But unlike the first time, when he woke up the second time, he was paralyzed on the right side of his body. We had no idea that was even going to happen. I mean, the amount of confidence the medical community exuded about doing this surgery on him, they made it seem like it was no different than doing an orthoscopic surgery on your knee.
He was in surgery for 11 hours, and after surgery, they were the first. If you've ever had a child with brain cancer and they go through surgery, the first 24 hours it's a whole new level of hell that I would never wish on my worst enemy. They're poking and prodding your kid. They're touching them and saying, hey, do you feel this? Can you move this? They're looking in their pupils to see if there's any sort of anything in his brain that's awake. And you just have to stand and watch them do it because they're looking to see if they did anything, to see what trauma has happened from that surgery. That's what they're looking for. And then when they were doing it with Ben, within a couple hours, he should have been waking up and he wasn't. He should have been moving his arms and legs, and he wasn't. And they were touching his fingers, saying, Ben, can you feel this? And he just was out of it. And Ben, can you feel this? Can you move this? And so they're telling me, okay, he should be more awake by now, and he's not. He should be moving more, and he's not. We're concerned. We think maybe something was cut. If he's not moving and more awake by morning, we need to get him back in for a CT to see what's going on. So about 8 o'clock in the morning, they come back in. He's kind of more awake. And again, they're touching his arm. Ben, can you feel this? And he's saying no. And they're saying, Ben, can you move your arm? And he can't move his arm. And they're touching his toes, saying, Ben, can you wiggle your toes? He can't move his toes. He's completely paralyzed on the right side, and his mouth is droopy, more than it was when we went into surgery. I think I've never had a panic attack, so I don't know what one feels like, but I'm pretty sure I had one because I couldn't breathe. And my husband sent me outside because I was just like, I looked at Jesse and said, what did we do? What did they do to our child?
They told us that he had a mini stroke and that his right side would come back over time. And we went from one hospital to another where we'd be at for the next 6-8 weeks, something like that, in intense physical therapy and rehabilitation to try to help him walk again. And as I tell the story, I look back at it, and there are so many missteps along this way.
When you have a doctor standing in front of you and they're saying, okay, we're going to cut open your child's brain again, of course you have all these, you would think you would have all these questions, right? Okay, what are the side effects? What are you cutting into? What's going to happen? For the life of me, I feel like I had none. I had absolute trust in these doctors, and I thought that if it was a complicated or dangerous surgery, that they would have told us, okay, now listen, this is where we're going in the brain. This could happen. This could happen. This could happen. If he has a stroke, this is what could happen. Come to find out 6 months after the surgery, he goes in for an eye exam and he's lost half of his vision. We were never told that. And it wasn't from the tumor. It was from the surgery. If we were told that he would lose his right peripheral vision, we would not have had that surgery because you cannot get that back. Now that affects his ability to drive, affects his whole life. Losing half of his vision, and not from the tumor, it was from the surgery. How could you just not tell us that? So I have a lot of mom guilt about that. So after the surgery, that is what happened to him. And we went into inpatient physical therapy for about 8 weeks.
We continued to follow blindly to what the medical professionals were telling us, except for one little thing. After the second surgery, while Ben was in the intense, inpatient physical therapy deal, my wife just started reading, which she's always been a big reader and she's always enjoyed researching, but she read and read and read and read, and I think she got through 3 or 4 books just in that short period of time. And before we got him out of the rehab center, we had already switched him over to a plant-based diet at that point. I actually will never forget, they sent a nutritionist up to our room and said, we're concerned your son's not eating enough because we keep getting all these full plates of food back. I mean, they weren't completely full. I was eating the food that was on those plates as much as I could, but we said, no, we're feeding them our own stuff. We brought our own food in, and you would have thought we had a third eye in the middle of our foreheads. They looked at us like we were absolutely nuts.
So he was in PT for 8 weeks, and they were able to get about 75% of the tumor. I honestly think they went too deep and got too much. That's why he had all these issues. The doctors, the neurosurgeon, the team was just supposed to get enough to relieve the pressure off the brainstem. And after looking at the scans, I feel like they were too aggressive. And that's another thing that bothered me was right after the surgery, when you talk with the doctor about what happened in the surgery, before you see your kid, it's in that room, how'd the surgery go and everything. They told us that the tumor was entangled in a lot of important blood vessels, and it was a nasty tumor. Just kept on saying it's a nasty tumor. It was entangled in a lot of important blood vessels, and we lost the right side of his body, but then we were able to get it back. That's what we were told. And at this point, I'm just like, I want to see my kid. What I don't even know what that means, but I just want to see my kid. But I was like, you got it back. Yes, we got it back. The signals came back. Yes. So what upsets me, sorry, I'm going back a little bit because it's all coming to me, that they were in my son's brain and they saw how nasty this tumor was, and they saw how entangled this tumor was in all these important blood vessels, why didn't they not stop and come out and talk to us about it? Hey, we got about 20%. This is what we're looking at. Are we okay to continue, or do you want to see where this leaves him? They just decided on their own to go and take the risk and go and get as much as they want. And in the whole 11 hours that my kid was in brain surgery, not one person came out and talked to us or told us or updated us or anything. And I'm not going to say what hospital this was at, but this was not no country hunky-dory hospital. This is a nationwide, like, respected hospital. And this should not have happened. So he spent about 8 weeks in PT. He was able to walk again with the help of a AFO on his foot. And he has worked every day since then, trying to walk, run, be a normal child. His knee still hyperextends. So even the things that we asked for them to, even the things that they said, hey, if we go in and get this brain tumor out, we can't get it all because it's next to the brainstem, but if we go in and get as much as we can, it's going to relieve those issues. Well, they made everything worse. We made everything worse. Now, I'm not blaming the doctors. This is on my husband and I, myself, because we signed the consents. We agreed for them to perform this. So a lot of guilt is on me and my husband. Anyway, so nothing was taken care of. Actually, everything was worse. So he's had to learn how to walk again. He's had to learn how to use his arm again. He's had to learn how to talk again. He struggles with his saliva and drool coming down his right side. He now has seizures that has developed from the surgery, not from the tumor. The first tumor the seizures was from the tumor, but the seizures now are from the brain surgery. He was not having seizures until about a year and a half after the brain surgery. And what we are being told by the neurologist is it's from scar tissue from the surgery. And he's lost half of his right peripheral vision, like I said. So if you would look at something and draw a line down it, the right side's gone. He can only see the left. And that is all from the surgery, from the treatment they recommended, and not from the tumor.
So we get him out of the rehab center. We've moved him to a full plant-based diet. There's still half of the mass still left entangled in his brainstem, added to which it's a polycystic tumor. So it's ballooning cysts off of it. One was ballooning up in the empty cavity in his brain where they had done the resection. The other one was building inside of his brainstem and was kind of ballooning up. We told our oncology team what we were doing as far as the plant-based diet. We also knew about hemp because of the first surgery. I had said he didn't have a seizure after the first surgery, but they had kept him on seizure medicine, and Ben is extremely sensitive to medications of all types. So we had started giving him full spectrum hemp oil after the first surgery, and ultimately got him off of the seizure medicine and saw a major drastic change in his behavior during that time. So we were doing some naturopathic things with him, and we were trying to avoid chemo. Ben's extremely sensitive to medications, so chemo, in my mind, was the worst possible thing I could ever imagine giving him. If the kid took an antibiotic, it would make him go crazy. So in my mind, I'm thinking chemo is the worst drug in the world. It's poison. I can't give this to my son. It'll kill him. So we were doing some naturopathic things at that point in time alongside the plant-based diet, and about 6-7 months after the second surgery, his eye started to go to the right and his head was starting to tilt, and it was the pressure that the cysts were causing inside of his brain. So we're approached again by the same medical team, and they want to do another surgery. They want to go in for a third time and put an Omira in his brain, which is kind of like a port that they would be able to draw fluid out. And I didn't want to do another surgery. Steph didn't want to do another surgery. But when we looked at it, in my mind, the chemo was the worst possible thing that we could do to him, even worse than the surgery, which it wasn't. But that's what I saw. And that was probably the only time throughout the whole thing that her and I were not completely on the same page about. So we're talking with the oncologist. They had a new drug out that they were doing some trials on with some of the other kids. It was called trametinib. It was a pill. It's an inhibitor. And we decided we're going to go that route. So we started the chemo, and we were told, don't expect any miracles. This is not going to take the cancer away. Best case scenario, in about 9 months of him taking it, we will see the tumor stop growing, and we'll see the cyst stop growing, which is where the surgeon was going. You don't have 9 months because the cyst is ballooning up too fast and it's putting pressure on things. At the same time that we started the chemo, pretty close to the same time, Stephanie had met Kimmy, because the research didn't stop with the plant-based diet. The research continued, and she read and fed on everything she could. If there was something out there that said that it could help with cancer, we were trying it, by golly, especially if it was, plant-based.
And the neurosurgeon told us, okay, if you try chemo, that's fine. We will give it 30 days, but I've never seen a chemo shrink a cyst. A cyst, when it starts growing like this, it needs to be medically drained. But that's fine if you want to try chemo first, but I've never seen it happen. And our team said the same thing. Our oncology team said the same thing. We haven't seen a chemo shrink a cyst, but we can try it if that's what you guys want to do.
Stephanie found and connected with Kimmy. Kimmy had put some posts on Grayson's Facebook page saying that she was having success and having clear scans. And so Stephanie's digging in and she's saying, what are you doing? What is it that's working? And at that point, Kimmy told Stephanie about FICO, full extract cannabis oil.
I also did so much studies, like looking online at all the PubMed studies on cannabis, not just CBD, but THC, all the cannabinoids, to see if this might work for his tumor. And the studies I found just at my fingertips, all I had to do was plug in the right words, because I looked up cannabis. I looked up CBD for brain cancer, and I found the studies. But the studies I found specifically on full extract cannabis oil, not just a part of the cannabis, but the whole plant. It was overwhelming that these studies are out there.
For whatever reason, Stephanie and I just looked at each other and was like, let's see, we're putting him on poison, chemo. We've operated on his brain twice. He's been on these different seizure medicines. They've given him morphine. They've given him hydrocodone. They've given him oxycodone. This is a plant, right? I mean, it's a plant. And we were already believers in the plant-based diet. So what the heck? Let's give it a shot.
After I did my studying and I had a good feeling about the medicine, we call it the natural medicine. We started him within a week of the same time we started the chemo with Ben.
We go in, we start the inhibitor, we start the FICO, and when we go back and we look at the pictures now, we didn't even realize it was happening at the time, but within the first 8 weeks, we had gotten a half of a reduction. We reduced the cyst in half. It's half the size of what it was in the first 8 weeks. And his eye that was going sideways from the pressure started straightening up, and his head that was leaning over started standing back up. And it was all because we were relieving the pressure in his brain. But it couldn't have been the chemo, because the chemo is not a miracle drug. And as far as the surgeon is concerned, the chemo was not going to do anything to the cyst, right? So we knew at that point, we're on to something here. So we continued, and we stuck with that for a while. So we stuck with the plant-based diet. We stuck with the FICO. We stuck with the chemotherapy. And we watched this tumor shrink and shrink and shrink through the course of the first year.
when he started chemo, and I asked him before we put him on the cannabis, is there any interaction between this chemo inhibitor and cannabis? And they said, no, this is kind of a relatively new drug. But wait, are you talking about like THC, CBD? And I said, well, the whole plant. So I was kind of vague. And they said, no, there's no interaction. So they did not ask me, are you starting him on this? But they didn't tell me I couldn't. And they knew I was giving him lion's mane and turmeric and all these other cancer-fighting foods, right, and spices, that cannabis to me was just another plant. So he had a scan about 6 weeks later, and the cyst had not grown. In fact, it was probably about 30% smaller, the cyst, and the tumor was smaller too. The tumor, what was left on his brainstem. So the tumor is on his brainstem. It's attached to it. It's entwined in it. And the tumor was about 4 millimeters smaller by 6 weeks. And the oncologist came in the room with this huge smile. Oh my gosh, you're going to love these scans. And we're just like, oh my gosh. And the first thing they say to me is, oh, he's responding so well to the chemo. And, Jesse and we were like, we didn't really say anything about the cannabis because that was the first good scan that we'd had in a year. And at that moment, I realized that he wasn't going to need surgery, that the cyst is shrinking, and that whether it be the cannabis or the chemo, something's maybe a combination, something's working, and they're not going to cut my kid right now.
There's another mom that their son was on the same trametinib pharmaceutical inhibitor, and they were having some really bad side effects. He stopped growing. The other things I could go into, but there were lights and sirens that were starting to go off. So we went back to our oncologist. We said we want to pull Ben off of the chemo, and this is after he'd been on it for a year. He'd been on the FICO for the year, and we've seen the tumor reduce drastically. But there was still tumor there. It was still there. And so our oncologist is amazing. He's a wonderful guy. Out of all the doctors we've dealt with, he's our favorite. I mean, he is stuck by our side. He's told us he thought that we were crazy, that some of the things we were doing weren't going to work, but he never got in the way of it. And he supported our decision and our rights as parents to try everything we could try to beat this terrible, terrible disease. And so we went back to him and we said, well, we're gonna stop the trametinib. And he said, okay. He said, I'd like to see you stay on it longer, but I respect it. He said, you need to know when you take them off of it, it's going to rebound and it'll start growing again. We'll have to put them back on the chemo. We said, okay, that's fine. So we took him off of the chemo. We continued with the FICO. And about that same time, right in there, which we're talking, this is January of 2023, I believe, Stephanie had continued research, and she found that garlic, plain old basic simple garlic, has an enzyme in it that it releases. And Steph could tell you exactly what the word of that enzyme is. I don't know. But this enzyme will release when it aerates for at least 15 minutes. So this enzyme has been seen in labs to fight glios, which the type of tumor that Ben was up against was a glio. You've probably heard of glioblastoma, which is one of the worst of the worst. That's like stage 4. Ben's was much less. And Ben's, they told us, it was never about him dying. It was about his quality of life because of where the tumor was located. Being in the brainstem's a very bad place to have a tumor. Not that there's a good place, but nonetheless. So she started giving him raw garlic twice a day. All right, we would chop up a clove of garlic in the morning. We'd chop up one in the evening. Each time we'd let it aerate for 15 minutes, and we would feed it to him. And so we stopped the chemo. We inserted the garlic. We continued with the FICO. Tumor didn't grow. He's off of the chemo. Tumor didn't grow. Stayed where it was. And we continued that for 6 months. It just stayed where it was. We were still giving him the FICO. We were still giving him the garlic, and it stayed where it was.
Within the first 6 months of the chemo and the cannabis, and I say both because he was on both, okay? I'm not going to say it was 100% the cannabis. I'm not going to say it was 100% the chemo because I don't know. I do think in my heart and in my gut it was the cannabis because the doctors have never seen chemo shrink a cyst. And the neurosurgeon has never seen chemo shrink a cyst. They did not think it was going to work. So that's where my gut's telling me. But for everybody that I tell the story, listen, yeah, he was on chemo, but he was on cannabis. And so by the end of the year, the tumor was about half the size. There was still active tumor on his brainstem, and the cyst went from 40 to 50 millimeter to 15. And I said, I want to stop the chemo. And he said, well, typically we want you to be on this inhibitor for about 2 years. And I said, well, I don't want him to be on chemo if he doesn't have to. I don't want to put this inside of his body if he doesn't need it. And they're like, okay, well, he's responding really well to the chemo, so let's go ahead and we'll take him off, but don't be surprised if the tumor starts growing again, because we see more times than not that as soon as we stop the chemo, unfortunately, the tumor can get more aggressive and bounce right back, and we're right back where we started. And if the tumor's growing, then the cyst is going to grow because the tumor is feeding the cyst. I said, okay, and I'm willing to take that chance to see. So we stopped the chemo, and we just gave him cannabis, and the next scan, the cyst it hadn't changed, it hadn't gotten smaller, it hadn't grown, and the tumor hadn't really changed at that moment in time. Maybe it looked like a hair smaller, maybe, but did not grow. It did not balloon up like they told us it probably would. And they were shocked. They were like, well, this is remarkable. This is great. Okay, well, whatever you're doing, keep on doing it. He's still responding really well to the chemo. And we're like, he's not on chemo anymore. Oh, yeah, he's not. Well, whatever you're doing, just keep on doing it. The next scan, cyst is the same. The tumor, again, looks a hair smaller, but they're saying it looks stable, okay? That's it. In medical terminology, if the tumor grows by 4 millimeters or if it shrinks by 4 millimeters, the medical community and the doctors will say it's stable. So even though by the naked eye, it looked like it was shrinking, the radiologist is still saying it's stable. So for the next year, we went from having this probably 8 millimeter chunk left on his brainstem to probably about a 2 millimeter on his brainstem without chemo, without any Western medicine. All he had taken was cannabis. We'd started raw garlic and propolis. That was what we called natural chemo medicine. He was on cannabis, raw garlic, and propolis.
The craziest part of it all is fighting the cancer was the easy part. It was trying to repair the damage and what happened to our son. That's been the hard part. That's been the part that has consumed our lives. Little boy's not even 6 years old, and he woke up not able to move the right side of his body anymore. That's where the struggle's been. So we're doing fundraisers to try to get Ben to Texas because we found somebody that's doing things with red light therapy and functional neurology that involved like stem potting and that sort of thing. And I go to the local farmer's market and I'm passing out flyers. We're going to do a chicken plate dinner. It was put on by a wonderful man at Ben's school, Officer Lilly, who has been in full support of us and Ben through the entire journey. So I'm out handing out flyers, and there's a beekeeper there. All right, and this beekeeper, I give him a flyer, and I tell him a little bit about our story, and he says, I got to talk to you. Come over to my stand. So I go over, and I'm standing there talking with him, and he said, listen, I never would have thought I'd be a beekeeper. It wasn't my plans. 14 years prior, his dad had been told he had stage 4 lung cancer, and he had 6 months to live. 14 years from then, his dad's still alive. And the only thing that he did is he started giving his dad something called propolis. Propolis, propolis. This is something that the bees make inside of their hives, and they pack all the nooks and the crannies of the hive to keep outside elements from coming in while they're making their honey. A lot of beekeepers will call it like bee glue. I've talked to beekeepers that take this bee glue and they don't like it because it gets in their way, and they take it out and they pull it out and they throw it in the trash. We started giving Ben propolis twice a day. It was a pinch. That's the measurement on the little measuring spoon thing is called a pinch. We give him propolis twice a day with the garlic, and we continue with the FICO. 9 months later, the tumor's completely gone. Gone. He has what little bit of spot is left on his brainstem. They refer to it as like a birthmark, so to speak, like an imprint that the tumor left behind. So I don't have any way of ever knowing or proving that we could have done it without chemo, or that we could have done it without doing the surgery. I don't know. But I can prove by scans that we took what was left of the tumor and we shrunk it gone a year and a half after being off of chemo. We got it the rest of the way gone.
It still boggles my mind. But you know what? I feel like I can't stay there because I feel so lucky that we found something that worked, and we did not have to cut Ben open again. And he doesn't have an Omira, and he doesn't have a shunt. He has the deficits of what the brain surgery did to him, but it wasn't continued. It wasn't a continued harming. We're only healing now. We're on the healing path and not on the harming path. And I feel like a lot of cancer treatments, they're more harmful. And I feel like a lot of kids die from the cancer treatments than the cancer itself. And it's just that's just how I look at it sometimes. And yeah, because I've seen it from myself for Ben. Like, he was one way. He walked into the hospital. We were dancing while we were waiting for him to get on the operating table. And then 11 hours later, he is paralyzed from a treatment that they recommended. That's not on the healing path. That's a harming path. And we harmed our kid on that path when there was another path that we could have taken had I known about it and been able to make that decision for ourselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Ben. How I beat cancer is I started to use chemo, and I couldn't eat for 1 hour. And it shrunk the bad guy, and then I used applesauce and tar to keep the bad guy away so he can come back. And I started to use this medicine, which I can't remember what I called it, that stopped the seizures from happening.
It was a really hard time. I still struggle with it to this day, unfortunately. It's hard to see him just sit there and not be able to use his body like he should be able to. I mean, how is it fair for me to be able to use both my hands and he be able to use one of them,
I lost half of my part of my body, and I'm bringing it back, and I'm not giving up. I can still move my fingers every once in a while, but I can't move it when it gets tired.
E. And yes! Ben!
I'm so proud of you.
Did I do even better?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We didn't need to do that to him. He responded so well,
That's right.
so well to a plant that we could have given him. And that's hard. And it makes me mad that that information was not out there for me to find, to see, to read, to hear about. And I just think people are scared.
This is going to sound contradictory, but it is super important that you do your own research. You do not want to just see a video and be like, oh yeah, we're just gonna follow that. You know, you should absolutely take advice. Do your own research about it though, please. I don't care if they are right or wrong. You know, I'm obviously telling you about this wonderful cannabis plant, but who knows, I could be lying. I'm not, obviously. But, you know, you need to do your own research about stuff. That's how my mom found out about the cannabis. If she did not do that research, we would have not been in this place. We would still have him be taking, chemo. His hair would still be white. You know, he would still not be okay.
And the whole point to all of this, to these families that we're with, and these families that we've become bonded to, we're not given these options as parents. When you're standing in the hospital and they tell you that your child, your baby, is got cancer or a tumor, which is cancer, you're given 3 options. We can do surgery, we can give them chemo, or we can radiate them. Those are your options. That's what you're told. That's all that we know that we can do in Western medicine, is to cut, drug, or blast with radiation. In hindsight, when we look back at how things went, we had time. We had some time. Ben could have maybe had a stroke, possibly, before the second surgery, or from the growth going into the second surgery. There is a chance Ben could have had a stroke, but we don't know. I mean, we don't know that he would have. We don't know that these things that we have found along our path, we don't know that they would have fought the cancer on their own without the surgery or without the chemo. But we weren't ever given the chance to try.
And that's why it's so important for us to tell our story with Ben, because if we could prevent just one family from going down that hurting road, it's worth it. And, you know, I feel like we're putting our necks out there telling our stories like this, but it's worth it, because seeing what's happened to Ben and seeing what's happened to our family, it has to stop. It has to stop. And that's why I just love what Kimmy's doing. And if it wasn't for Kimmy sharing Gray's story and being such an open book with it, I would have never found the medicine, because it's so hidden. I don't think I would have ever found it. And so I share it. And it's by me sharing that Julie found the medicine from Maddie, you know? So it's worked for us. It may not work for everybody. I know it doesn't work for everybody, but what if? What if it helps your child? What if you can prevent them from going under the knife or having a port in their chest? What if? Why not try it? Like, first. Why not go there first instead of the other direction?